Hello, everyone. My name is Jill Moyer, and I am an instructor here at CTU for English 105. And I am so excited today to be presenting Unit 2, Writing Arguments in the Digital Age, how we can write arguments that make a difference. So obviously, for all of you, you have been working through Unit 1. You hopefully have a little bit of a feel of IntelliPath and all of that good stuff. So now we're really going to get into how to write arguments using some of the skills that you are developing. So for today, we are going to talk about where we argue in the digital age, why these arguments matter, what makes an argument persuasive, what makes you and your argument credible, and what that is information. We're going to talk about where information comes from and the first few steps with TAPP, which we will talk more about later. But one thing I just wanted to start off with is a little bit of trivia. Did you know that Google answers 40,000 search queries every second? Think about that. Every second, 40,000 people are on Google trying to get an answer to something. Maybe it's a medical question or a question about school or something minor or how many cups in a gallon, things like that. Think of how many times you have used Google or another search engine to find out information. That is all research. The power that you have is the ability to seek truth, impact the world, and help and serve others. And when you take writing and add research, it empowers you to realize these goals one step at a time. Now, I just want you to take a moment, sit and look at this photo, and think about what comes to your mind when you hear the word argument. Really think about what an argument is. I chose this slide because I think a lot of the people assume that arguments mean a fight. Arms raised, voices raised, red-faced, maybe, hands on hips, pacing back and forth, a lot of yelling. In fact, an argument is a work of persuasion. You use it to convince others to agree with your claim or viewpoint when they have doubts or disagree. While we sometimes think of arguments as hostile and bitter, they don't need to be that way. In fact, a good argument is quite calm, reasonable, and fair-minded. And I wanted to kind of develop this idea of the difference between an argument and opinion. DeVries said that arguments are different from opinions because they use evidence to support a claim. An opinion is just a matter of personal preference. But an argument is making a claim that a statement is true based on evidence rather than one's personal feelings on a topic. And the thing that I use to kind of illustrate this is the idea of your favorite color. Many people, when they're children, use circular logic. Well, if my favorite color is blue, everyone's favorite color is blue, yours should be too. That's kind of circular, well, I said it's true, it's my favorite, so then everybody has to have that as their favorite. But that's really just an opinion. However, we could use an argument to change that opinion and add some credibility to it. For example, if I stated that blue is the favorite color of 1,000 respondents when asked, what is your favorite color? 90% said blue was it. Or you could use something like 75% of people chose blue as the favorite interior color of a house. Then all of a sudden, your opinion had credibility. It became an argument. And the reason is you have used information and credible resources to push your viewpoint. You were able to persuade based on evidence. So when, where, and why do we argue? We argue when we disagree, when we come upon a problem that doesn't have a solution. We argue when there is a question with multiple right answers, meaning an idea that can be debated. When there are different options and choices, sometimes it leads to an argument. We can sometimes argue when we aren't sure and we need to learn more. And sometimes we argue when it really, really matters to us. Think about something that really matters to you. Maybe it has to do with an allergy or something to do with your child or your family or your friend. And it really matters that someone agrees with what you're saying. An argument is all about doing the work, learning about a topic, deciding what's right, what's the best path forward, and sharing that journey with your audience. It means you have a passion and care about your opinion, that you want other people to listen to it, and you perhaps want to persuade them to get on your side. Some elements of a solid argument include that your claim is true. Remember, we went back a little bit to that blue being a favorite color. If we don't know the stats, if we haven't researched that, we don't know if that claim is true. So what we want to have is sufficient evidence to support that claim and avoid what we just talked about, that circular logic. So what about research and arguments? Let's talk a little bit about that. One of the things in this comic that I really liked is it says, it doesn't matter how many hours of research you've done, unless you provide legitimate sources and actual evidence, you're just the teacher in a Charlie Brown cartoon. So you can do all the research you want, but it has to be credible. And we'll talk a lot about that later. But why research is important is because it impacts you. It should impact how you feel when you're questing for that information, when you're on a journey to discover whether your opinion is based in reality, in facts. But the challenge there is deciding who to trust. And our research is so important because once we make the argument, we're impacting others. We're sharing what we have learned. They're looking to us to have done the research and trusted our sources. And the challenge is persuading an audience to listen to what you're saying. And perhaps, persuading someone that has a set mind on an opinion, trying to change that. It can be very difficult. So how do you structure and craft an argument? You want to start with your audience and your purpose. You want to know who you're writing to and why. What do you want to accomplish? Now, we talk about maintaining a professional tone that is also objective. I have some tips here, but before I share those tips, I want you to think. Think about your text messages, your emails, your conversations. Do you change the way you approach different individuals? Do you text perhaps your boss the same way you would text your best friend? Do you write an email to your sister or brother in the same tone that you would write it to the CEO of your company? See, we already know about audience. We oftentimes will skew things for our children, perhaps, or our parents. If we're teaching our 5-year-old history, it's going to be a lot different than teaching our high schooler about history. That's knowing your audience. Again, something you already do. Now, you also want to maintain that professional tone when you're crafting an argument. You want to avoid personal pronouns such as I, me, and my. Avoiding phrases such as I believe, I think, or it's my opinion. Think back. Remember, we talked about if it's just your opinion, why does someone have to believe it? If you went to a restaurant and you read, some person on the internet said it was good, that I don't know if they're credible. Maybe they work for the company. But if you read a bunch of different reviews on Yelp, there's 50,000 reviews and 49,999 of them are saying it's good. Well, that's no longer one opinion. That's credible information. So research shows or information states, sources say. That's better than saying, I think, I believe, or my opinion. You want to avoid emotional claims, exclamation points, or insults or attacks. Avoid opinionated language such as dislike, terrifying, awful, idiotic, stupid, dumb. You want to show your evidence. At the same time, you want to be respectful. Be respectful to your audience and be respectful to those that may disagree with you. If you don't acknowledge that there is an opposing viewpoint, you will lose a lot of your audience. They need to know that, yes, I know there's another opinion, but mine is the stronger argument. So when you present an argument, you are asking your audience to trust you. What will make you credible to make you worthy of that trust? Doing your research helps you to gain credibility and trust because you are asking them to change their minds and or their behavior. Think about what it takes to change your mind. What do you need to see? Put yourself in the audience's shoes. Think about what you would need to do to change someone's mind. And a lot of times it is the same situation that would change your own mind. Many of us have deep-seated beliefs that it takes a lot to change. So let's talk about an exercise in persuasion. We're going to talk about some examples for a kind of situation that may be happening right now. You are a barbecue restaurant owner in a resort town in Jackson, Wyoming. You normally have a steady stream of tourists coming in and out, but right now everything's shut down. The tourists are gone and people are scared and out of work. Lots of restaurants are competing for the business of the remaining locals. You've moved from dine-in to curbside pickup in response to the current pandemic. Now, you need to convince your audience to pick your restaurant for dinner. So our audience is who? Think about that. Our audience is our customers, the people of Jackson, Wyoming that are, within pickup distance of the restaurant. And the purpose is pretty clear. We want them to come to our restaurant. Your platform, which is where you're going to send out this message, will be a social media post. Now let's look at a couple of examples and why they could or would not work. Option one is to go on the offensive, writing, "We've got the best barbecue in town. Disagree? You're an idiot." Stuffing your face with that toxic, high-priced garbage next door. Did you know they've been written up by the health department twice for COVID violations? Choose the smart barbecue for your family. If you care about their safety, that is. Real cowboys and cowgirls know where to eat after a long day playing in the Tetons. So that's a way to build an argument. You attack anyone who might disagree or oppose what you're saying. You can also attack competing ideas. But this is more about guilting or shaming your audience into changing their minds. You're making them feel small or not worthy if they don't come to your restaurant. This can also appeal to those that feel like, oh, if everyone else is doing this, I guess I have to do this or I won't belong. Think about reasons why this is unethical and this could go wrong. Some people could look at this and say, if this is how these people act, if they just want to tear everyone down, that might not be a restaurant I want to go to. Option number two is to trick your audience. Did you know people who eat barbecue live longer? It's true. Don't believe me? Just ask our 95-year-old regulars. They swear by your brisket, by our brisket. Eat barbecue, live longer, barbecue for your health. Well, that's a complete trick. It's a fabrication. They're just making facts up. You're providing false information, pulling on heartstrings, and playing on your audience's fears, insecurities, or wants. This could go wrong because what if someone starts eating your barbecue every single day because they think it's great? Now they're eating barbecue every single day and their cholesterol goes up, or they notice they're gaining weight. Well, then all of a sudden, they feel lied to. And most people may know this probably isn't the best for me to do all the time. So they know you're kind of tricking them, which is also unethical. So finally, let's persuade them the right way. Let's look at an appropriate social media post that will gain some of those customers that we so richly desire. Feeling hungry after a long day in the mountains? Looking for good times, good people, and great food? Fill your belly and your soul with brisket, cowboy vibes, and the best bang for your buck in Jackson. Voted #1 best value and #2 best bite in Best of Jackson 2020. Mention this ad for 15% off. It's a rough wilderness out there. Let JC's Barbecue make you feel right at home. So we persuaded them in a way that made this place seem fun. They talk about their cowboy vibes and they're filling their belly with the soul and your soul with the brisket. They're saying they're cheap. You're getting 15% off, and they used facts. They were voted #1 best value and #2 best bite in Best of Jackson 2020. And more than likely, many local customers will know what Best of Jackson is. You probably have something like that in your own town. So that is a great way to persuade customers to choose your restaurant. So the right way to argue is to be logical, be clear and detailed, explain your reasoning, be ethical, use evidence. And when I say evidence, real evidence, not just ask our 95-year-old customer how healthy he is from eating our barbecue. Be professional and respectful, and be human. Think about who your audience is and what would appeal to them. Why should it matter to them? Connect with them, but avoid connecting with them by lying, insulting, or manipulating them. Be respectful of your audience. So what's an argument structure? Here's the basic structure of an argument. You have your argument. This is what you are trying to convince your audience to do or believe. Then you give your reasoning. These are your points or claims that explain how you know your argument is true. Then you use evidence to support that claim and helps convince your audience that you know this is true. Have you ever heard that phrase, if this, then that? So I have my reasons and I have my evidence to back up my reasons. So to write a great argument, you need research, evidence that supports your experience and reasons. Research makes your argument more logical, ethical, and human. So where does our knowledge come from? That matters a lot, where we go and get it. And how we evaluate and analyze that matters even more. The reason is because each one of us will interpret and look at a piece of evidence and react to it in a different way. Our own life, our own experiences are where our knowledge comes from, even when we're looking at evidence. So it's really important that you know how to evaluate and analyze that knowledge. So we write because we have something to say. And we're usually writing because we feel that something that we're going to say will help someone do something. The writing process is simply thinking and making decisions. But before we can write, we must first know. We need to know what we're talking about. We need to be experts on our argument. And that can come from personal experience, primary sources, or secondary sources. Personal experience is pretty self-explanatory, something you have experienced. A primary source is a source that was there when it happened, an eyewitness. Secondary sources are those sources that take into account what others are saying. They weren't there, but they did interviews perhaps, or they've researched themselves and got information secondhand. A lot of research that you will do is based on those secondary sources, but you need to know the difference between the two. So how we tend to research is we have an opinion, and then we do a Google search to look for things that support our opinion. We just plug in the first Google search item that we find that agrees with us. That's what we use to support. That's not the best way to research. I use this example with my class a lot, playing a bit of detective. And this is both an idea of don't always go with your gut or your feeling, because sometimes it could be wrong. This is all about playing detective. Let's look at this screen. I have an arrow pointing to a gentleman. He is the same gentleman that is in the white surrounded picture with a black car in the background. That's the same gentleman. And I asked my students to think about who that is. There's also another picture up in the top corner of a woman on looks like steps with some dogs. And I've gotten great responses, a lot off the wall responses from mob boss to prohibitioner to gambler to drinker. I've gotten someone say a Lothario. So a lot of different ideas come into play. And if you said, well, I think he's a gambler because look, he's playing cards. So you see some evidence, something right in front of you. But that, if you keep that opinion, no matter what, you'll miss out on the truth. So let's see who this gentleman really is. This gentleman is my great grandfather. His name is Vincent. He was the fire department chief for Trenton, New Jersey. A quick Google search might get you that information. Maybe not. This is quite narrow. But these two pictures show him as a working fireman and then on his day of retirement. So if we had never researched, never checked, and just went by those pictures, there was only one clue as to what he really was and who he really was. The picture in the upper corner of the woman with the dogs, those puppies were Dalmatian puppies, and they would live at my great-grandparents' house until they were taken out to the different fire stations to be their Dalmatians. That was the only clue, and it's kind of the one that threw everybody off. Maybe you discounted that clue because you were like, oh, maybe that's just kind of there to trip me up. But that is why research should work in this way. You should be asking questions and seeking answers, gathering knowledge, developing new ideas, and use knowledge to support those ideas. You shouldn't always be steadfast in your opinion. Thesis statements might be a scary word that you've heard, or arguments. All of these mean the same thing. They can change. Research can change an opinion. Research can change a mind. And the ability to argument using research and sources and your own knowledge of that research and sources can help you change those minds. So what about the difference between popular and scholarly sources? Popular sources are things that we see all around us. Maybe magazines are probably the easiest way to describe them. Scholarly or academic sources are those that you find in library databases, medical journals, academic journals, literary journals. All of those are considered scholarly or academic sources. Popular sources are easier to find. They tend to be for a general audience. They can be published quickly, but they can be more easily swayed or impacted by bias in public opinion because they're driven by profit. They are more focused on the individual and personal experience. That's not to say they would never be used, but you want to be able to easily identify what a popular source is. How about scholarly sources? They are a bit harder to find. You normally need access, like you have here at CTU, to get into a library database. Your local library will oftentimes have library databases. You may have heard of them as ProQuest or EBSCOhost. Those are some of the databases where you can find scholarly sources. They tend to be for a specialized audience. For example, like a medical journal would maybe be for someone that's studying to be a nurse or a physician. They take time to publish, and they're not driven by money. They're driven by scholarship and research. There's not an incentive with money, so less biases are present. They are more focused on the topic and the information they provide. I want you to remember there's no such thing as an unbiased, perfect, or even a bad source. We must navigate info and decide which source is the best for our purpose, audience, and topic. Every single source that we find has limitations and biases. So what about the pros and cons? Let's first look at something like CTU Library and Google Scholar. Those are those sources that are a lot of times peer reviewed. They're not profit driven. There's thousands of scholarly articles, magazines, newspapers, and more. They take more effort to locate. It's a little bit harder to narrow them down. There's more tools and resources, but they're credible. But are they relevant or current? That can be difficult, especially when you're getting into medical journals. And I've seen one that, have stuff about biology, and it's like I'm reading a different language. So you want to make sure that you understand those sources, and some can be quite outdated. They're usually a secondary source and come from a scholarly perspective. So those are some of the pros and cons of those. How about Google? Well, those have billions of information sources, websites, wikis, blogs, magazines, news, videos, podcasts, social media. They're very easy to find. Anyone with a computer or a cell phone that can get onto the internet has the ability to find them. They're also often very current, but it's a bit harder to determine credibility. And they have a combination of both secondary and primary sources, but they're usually skewed toward a personal or individual perspective. So I'm going to give you two things that you may have encountered or may encounter one day. So this is my first research issue. My son has special needs and is having a hard time at school. I'm looking for support and to hear from other moms. That's key, other moms. I want to hear their experiences to understand what their journey was like. I just want to know that I'm not alone. What information source will help me satisfy that? If you look at these, the best source would be a Facebook group for mothers with special needs, because this individual is looking to hear from other moms. Scholarly articles, and even a magazine article with the history of autism, or a medical website that just tells you what autism is, may not give you any perspective from other moms, especially those scholarly articles, because that's just talking about the rates. Now, for the second one, you're conducting research again. But this time, my son's speech therapist has recommended two different treatment options for my son. I need to decide which option is the best for him, which will have the best long-term outcome, and which one will be the best for him and our family. Rather than just a support group or a news article or even a YouTuber that deals with autism, we're looking for real solid medical advice. So a scholarly article comparing different treatment options and long-term outcomes connects the best with that research. And for most of us, we would understand that right off the bat. This is kind of showing you the skill that you already have. So your information should not only be credible, but should be right for you and right for what you are arguing or trying to persuade others to believe. They should help you satisfy your purpose, connect with your audience, and better understand your topic. Before you even make sure they're credible, you need to make sure you understand them. But when we're looking at credibility, think of a crab. You want to look at authority. Who's writing the source? Are they experts in the field? Do they know the information? Do they know what they're talking about? Is the information current? And does your topic require current information? If you're talking about something digital or about social media, a source that's 20 years old might not be current enough. You'd want something that is pretty new. Is the information relevant? Does it connect to your topic? Is the information accurate? Meaning, is there sources to back up what they're saying? Do you see a lot of spelling errors, run-ons, fragments? Is it hard to follow? Can you access the sources that it's using to back up its claims? When you click on a website, it recommends, is that website still in existence? Finally, you want to check for bias. Make sure that they're coming from an unbiased position. If you want to buy a specific car, you wouldn't just go to the car's website. You'd want to find other opinions, because if you were looking at a Jeep and you went to a Jeep website, they want you to buy their Jeep. So they are going to maintain all the best aspects of that vehicle. So think about TAP. Before we start researching or writing your argument, we need to know topic, audience, purpose, and platform. Your topic should be interesting and meaningful to you, focused and specific, relevant to your project assignment and task. If you're having trouble, begin your research in a broad area. Then you may get inspired. For example, if you want to talk about a healthy lifestyle and you start plugging away and researching, and this will be completely made up, but let's say you find that the XYZ diet is the best diet for a 20-year-old. Well, now you've just narrowed and found your topic. XYZ diet is the best diet for people in their 20s because now you have your topic. Next, you're going to think about your audience, who they are, what their values are, and what their needs are. You need to be able to convince them that this matters to them. Make sure that you're looking at all reasons why it would matter, not just your own. Think about what they already know about the topic and think about any biases, concerns, or questions they may have. Your third step is your purpose. Why are you writing this? Why are you trying to persuade them? Are you trying to just inform them? Just give them the facts and just the facts? Are you trying to get them onto your side? Are you just describing something? Get specific. What do you really want your audience to do and what are your goals? Then think about what it will take to get them to change, to do whatever it is you want them to do. Finally, know your platform. If you're doing this for school, where will you be writing it? Is it for an essay, a discussion board? What are the rules and guidelines and expectations? Here, you will normally be researching in Google or CTU Library. Think about the way you search. Maybe come up with 2 to 4 words to use to start your search. Think of how Boolean operators like and, or, things like that can change your search a little bit to narrow it down and get you the information you need. I hope you've enjoyed Unit 2. If you have any questions, please use the Writing Center, the library, your workshops, or contact your instructor. They are here to help. I want to thank all of you for watching. And please, if you have any questions, contact your instructor. Have a great day, everyone.